Before God multiplies what you have, He first multiplies what you believe. Financial increase doesn't start with money, it starts with mindset. Many people pray for more, but still think in terms of survival and lack. They say they trust God, but their words reveal fear. What if it doesn't work out? What if I lose everything? What if I'm not meant to prosper? These are not just harmless thoughts, they create spiritual resistance against God's provision. Heaven responds to faith, not fear. When God said He is about to multiply your finances, He wasn't just talking about numbers. He was talking about your mentality shifting from barely enough to more than enough. You cannot walk into abundance while thinking like a victim of scarcity. Scarcity says, I must hold tightly to what I have. Faith says, what I have is a seed, and God can multiply it. This is where most people get stuck. They are asking for harvest, but holding their seed in fear. The enemy doesn't fear your money, he fears your belief. The moment your mindset aligns with God's promise, heaven releases acceleration. That is why God often speaks increase before you see it. He speaks multiplication to wake up your faith and challenge your current level of thinking. If you are still rehearsing your past financial failures, you are not leaving room for new blessings. God is not limited by your past. He is only limited by your expectations. Your mindset becomes either a gate or a wall to financial miracles. Faith builds gates, fear builds walls. When your mind accepts that you are a child of the King, lack stops feeling normal. Struggle is no longer your identity. You begin to speak differently. You start declaring, my source is not my job. My source is my God. He is unlimited. God is not just trying to pay your bills. He's trying to shift your position. There is a difference between living from paycheck to paycheck and living from overflow. Overflow is when God blesses you so much that what you carry begins to impact others. But that level requires a renewed mindset, one that expects increase. When you wake up and start thanking God in advance for financial multiplication, you activate a divine law of expectation. Expectation attracts blessing. God moves where faith is alive. So ask yourself today, what do I see when I think about my future? Do I see constant struggle or divine provision? Your answer reveals your mindset. When God speaks about multiplying your finances, He often follows it with an instruction. That's because obedience is the bridge between promise and manifestation. Many people love to hear prophetic words about increase, but very few understand that divine multiplication responds to action, not just emotion. God's blessings are not random. They are tied to moments where He tests your willingness to move beyond comfort. Obedience doesn't always make sense in the natural realm. God might tell you to give when you feel you should save, invest when you feel afraid, help someone even when your own needs aren't fully met. In those moments, your obedience becomes a seed of faith that heaven recognizes and honors. Think about the stories in Scripture. Every financial miracle began with an act of obedience. The widow who gave her last bit of oil, the boy who offered his small lunch that Jesus multiplied, Peter who cast his net one more time after a long night of failure, none of them saw multiplication until they obeyed a divine instruction. Obedience is proof that you trust God's economic system more than the world's. Obedience says, God, I may not understand how this will work, but I trust that your word produces results. And that trust becomes a signal to heaven. Sometimes God delays financial multiplication not because He doesn't want to bless you, but because He is waiting for your obedience to align with the blessing. He cannot multiply what you withhold. If fear makes you ignore divine nudges, like an idea to start something, a push to give, a call to forgive someone blocking your peace, then you are unintentionally closing the door to financial flow. Obedience unlocks overflow, not because God needs your action to prove something, but because obedience positions your heart in humility and alignment. A humble and aligned heart becomes a magnet for supernatural favor. Many people say, "When God blesses me, then I will obey." But heaven's principle is the opposite. When you obey, then I will release the blessing. You don't wait for the miracle to obey. You obey to trigger the miracle. And obedience is not just about money. It includes obedience in character, in managing time, in staying away from things that drain your spirit, in making decisions with integrity. Financial increase without spiritual discipline leads to financial loss. That's why God uses obedience as preparation. When you obey small instructions, you prove you can handle bigger miracles. God watches how you respond in the little before He releases the overflow. If He tells you to give and you hesitate, if He nudges you to take a step in faith and you delay, it's not just disobedience. It's a delay in your own financial destiny. But when you move quickly in obedience, heaven moves quickly in multiplication. Every financial breakthrough in the kingdom begins with a seed. God's multiplication doesn't fall from the sky. It grows from what you are willing to release. Just like a farmer cannot expect a harvest without planting seeds, many people are waiting for financial increase while still holding tightly to what little they have. Seed is not always money. It can be your time, your service, your skills, your kindness, your support, or even a small act of generosity done with the right heart. What you release with faith, God multiplies with power. The problem is, fear convinces people to keep everything, but faith teaches that what leaves your hand never leaves your life. It enters your future as a multiplied harvest. The principle of seed is powerful because it teaches trust. When a seed goes into the ground, it disappears from sight. It looks like you lost it. Many people give help or invest and then panic when they don't see instant results. They don't understand that every seed has a process. And the soil of obedience always produces something greater than what was planted. God never asks you to release something unless He intends to return it multiplied. When the little boy gave his bread and fish to Jesus, it looked small and insignificant, but in God's hands it fed thousands. That is the power of seed, small in your hand, massive in God's system. Sometimes God allows situations where your resources seem limited so He can teach you the principle of sowing. The enemy wants you to believe that giving reduces you, but heaven's law says giving positions you for increase. Every time you release something in faith, you send a signal to heaven that you trust God's economy more than the world's logic. The world says, hold it or you'll lose it. Faith says, release it and God will multiply it. There is no harvest without a release. But remember, seed without expectation is just donation. When you give, serve, or invest, you must do it with a prophetic mindset. This is not leaving me. This is coming back greater. Your seed is your voice in the spirit realm. It speaks on your behalf. It testifies that you believe in God's promise of multiplication. And because God is faithful, He responds to that faith. He may not return it in the same form. It could come back as a divine opportunity, a new connection, a sudden idea, debt cancellation, a job you didn't apply for, or supernatural favor you didn't see coming. When God speaks about multiplying your finances, understand that He is not bound by human timelines. What would normally take years can happen in moments when heaven accelerates your season. Divine multiplication is not always a slow process. Sometimes it is a sudden shift that no logic can explain. One idea, one connection, one unexpected phone call, one opportunity you didn't even chase can change everything. When God declares a season of multiplication, He compresses time. What others labor for over decades, you can step into through one moment of favor. That's why you must train your spirit to stay expectant, because sudden breakthroughs do not come with warnings. They arrive unannounced, and only those who are spiritually awake recognize and seize them. God is a God of divine acceleration. Look at Scripture. Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister overnight. Peter went from empty nets to overflowing abundance in one act of obedience. Ruth went from picking leftovers to owning the field in a single chapter of her life. These were not slow transitions. They were divine shifts triggered by faith and readiness. That is why you must never assume that because your current situation looks slow, your breakthrough will also be slow. God can do more in one day of favor than you could do in 10 years of effort. In a moment, He can connect you to the right person, open a door you couldn't open, or breathe on a small idea and turn it into a stream of income. But many people miss their moment because they are waiting for a slow build when God is preparing a sudden shift. They lose their expectation and start speaking words like, "Maybe it's not my time. Maybe this is just my life. Maybe I'm meant to struggle." Those words close the door to acceleration. Sudden blessings often feel like surprise to us, but in heaven, they were already scheduled. The key is to stay spiritually alert. If God tells you to prepare, prepare. If He tells you to apply, apply. If He tells you to move, move. Delay is dangerous in a season of acceleration. When a door opens, you must be ready to walk through it immediately. God won't multiply what you are not prepared to manage. Multiplication is not just about money increasing. It's about you becoming a person who can carry abundance without losing your peace, your focus, or your relationship with God. When God prepares to release financial increase, He also prepares your environment and your spirit. This is why you must guard your heart, your words, and your circle. The enemy knows he cannot stop God's blessing, so he tries to corrupt the atmosphere around you before the blessing arrives. He will use negativity, doubt, toxic conversations, and wrong associations to drain your faith and slow down your momentum. If your environment is heavy, your spirit will not be in position to attract favor. You cannot speak lack and expect abundance. You cannot surround yourself with people who complain about money and then expect God to trust you with financial influence. Words create spiritual climates. Every day you speak, you are either watering seeds of increase or strengthening the roots of scarcity. That is why you must become intentional with your confession. Wake up and declare, "I walk in divine provision. I am connected to supernatural supply. Money flows to me with purpose. I am a steward of kingdom wealth." These are not just positive statements, they are prophetic alignments. Then comes your circle. Financial multiplication requires you to walk with people of faith and vision, not those who feed fear. Some people are not bad, but they are not built for your next level. If being around them constantly drains your faith, steals your excitement, or makes you feel small, they are not meant to be close in this season. God is sending people who carry solutions, not excuses, people who speak increase, not limitation. Protect your energy, protect your focus, protect your spirit. What you allow around you either pulls you into overflow or keeps you stuck in survival mode. Finally, guard your heart. Don't let greed, pride, or comparison enter as God begins to bless you. Multiplication is not given just so you can have more. It's given so you can do more, bless more, influence more, and represent God's goodness with integrity. When your heart stays pure, God can trust you with greater resources. Financial increase without a guarded heart leads to destruction, but financial increase with a mature spirit